Okay, we'll start
Okay, we're
now. This
Do
is
I have to take any special note? I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to you.
Oh, talk to either of us.
Well, I have to turn my chair around.
Okay.
See, I do have a crooked jawline, and sometimes when I talk, I look kind of tough. And I don't like this bag to look tough.
Okay. This is an interview at the Beltron Living Center, Colonie, New York, 27th of August, 2003, approximately 1 p.m. The interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Okay, Marie Rose Zanetti Buckridge.
Okay.
Nee Zanetti Buckridge.
When were you born and where?
I was born in New York City, April 8th, 1917.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
Well, I went as far as high school at the time. And then I received additional training when I left the service.
Okay. Do you remember where you were and what your reaction was when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Well, that was in June.
December.
December.
41.
Of 41. I was not aware that there was going to be women in the military. But it bothered me very much because I love my country. And when I did hear, I think the early part of 42, they opened up the military to women officers. And we were given an aptitude test. And if you made 110 or better, they offered you an officer candidate, OCS. Those of us that rejected OCS, they kept us in abeyance, and we became the first group of sergeants, cadre, cook, mess sergeants, and so on and so forth. We trained the women as they were coming in. We were trained by the men only.
So you were the first group of women?
Of women, non-commissioned officers.
You joined in October of 1942?
Correct.
Why did you decide to go into the military?
Well, I wanted to do my share. As I say, prior to that, they didn't have the women. But after that, when I went down to be recruited, and I liked the program that they had, I felt that I should fit in. It was to my advantage to do so.
Okay. So you joined the Army. You went into the Army.
At the beginning, we were Army, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. That was where W.A.C. came in.
And then you went to the Air Corps?
In 42, they opened up the women's service to the Air Force, to the Navy, to the Marines. And we had a choice of leaving the Army to go to any one of the branches. So we didn't have a break in service per se, but we did get a transfer from one service to another, and I selected the Air Corps.
Why did you do that?
I love the air. I love the air.
Did you ever fly much, or?
No, not prior to it, because Amelia Earhart, she was my patron saint.
Did you ever see her?
Well, in the paper, you know, or something. I never met her in person. It would have been delightful if I did. I would have joined the pilots, but see, the women did pilot planes prior to the original Air Force, but they were not affiliated with any part of the service.
Right, I think they were called WASPs.
Right. And those women, you know, they get no recognition, and they were daring.
Okay, so you, being the first group, you were trained by men.
Correctly.
And what kind of training did you get?
Vigorous, strenuous, domineering. Because the men did not want us in the service. We were taking their jobs away, and they'd have us out in our high heels, marching in mud, and saying, go home to your kitchen, go home in your kitchen, that's where you belong. They didn't want us in service. They were discouraging us.
Now, initially, you told us what kind of uniforms did you get?
Well, it took us a while to get our uniforms, but we did get, regular Army uniforms, but instead of pants, we were allowed skirts.
But you said most of the uniforms you received were men's uniforms.
The first shipment of uniforms that came to Des Moines, Iowa, they forgot about the women, but they had no coats, no women's coats ready for us. So because it was really activated in about June of that year, and I'm talking about October and November of that year. So clothes-wise, they were not prepared for us to have a full contingency of what you would wear.
Okay. So what was it like being a pioneer in this?
Delightful, delicious, and well, if I was to do it over again, I would do it 10 times over for the simple reason. Before I went into service, talking to you, it would never happen. But after the service, from being drilled by men, having to get out there and pour forth your voice, you had to march women, and especially when you had 300 and 400 women, and in the front line, the back had to hear the same as the front, you had to project your voice. And they trained us in this big stable, horse stable. And the major that I was talking to you about, he if we didn't sound loud enough, he would come and slap us on the side with his whip.
Oh.
Yep, we were whipped and trained.
So you were trained by men, but then you became the trainers of the...
Right? Yeah, we became the cadre, and as the men departed, the women took their spots. We became like company clerks, sergeants, supply, first sergeant, drill sergeant, and we had all these, and then we had the women from that made it to Officer Canada. They were the first women, and we were the first contingency that they had to train and work with.
When did you receive a full woman's uniform?
Oh, I think it was. Well, we didn't have it for Christmas because they said they were going to give us a Christmas present and give us the coats, but we didn't get it until that early spring. We were quite a long time in the men's coats, but that was the only thing we had that were men's.
Okay. Now, you were out in Des Moines, Iowa.
I started in Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay, how long were you there?
Well, I was there for about 6 months for training. And then from there, I was transferred as supply sergeant. I worked from just a little private up to supply sergeant in Des Moines. And then from there, I went to Ogden, Utah, which was a delightful place. And that was for the Air Force. Being that I transferred from the Army into the Air Force, that was my first Air Force base.
Okay, and what did you do there?
Supply sergeant. I ordered supplies for the company, sheets, bedding, clothes, all had their clothes, if they needed alterations for their clothes, because all the uniforms didn't fit all the women. So, and we wanted them to look as nice and as precise as we could make them. So we took pride in wearing our uniform.
So you were a supply officer for a woman's unit then?
Correct.
You stayed with?
Correct.
Okay, how long were you in...
Well, I was there for about 5 months, and then when that started to operate properly, then I was transferred. I had a choice of going down to Florida or to go to Rome Air Force Base in New York. And being from New York, I took Griffith Air Force Base in Rome, New York. So I was transferred there, and I activated the unit with one of the entity that activated the unit up in Rome.
So that was basically your job was to activate units?
Correct, correct. Okay. And then from there, from Rome, I went to Newark Air Force Base. And there I really had a good time. So I transferred from company supply, but they needed a lot of the headquarters supply, because at that time the war was starting. In the early part of 45, the war was starting to be, no, towards the end of 44, it was starting to peter down. And a lot of the supplies that were over in foreign soils, we had to request what was to stay, what was to go. So we had to move a lot of the equipment around, and well, whatever.
Okay, so you stayed in Newark until the end
Until
of
I was
your service.
discharged, correct.
Okay,
And that was in, I think it was January, the end of January 45. Right.
okay, so basically you took care of the equipment at Newark.
Yeah. Well, whatever the company needed, the supply sergeant was there, and I would make up the requisitions and whatever. But you had to go according to Hoyle. It was a tough situation. And then we had very heavy lifting to do because we didn't have men to do it. So being athletically inclined, I always had my shoulder to the wheel until I was injured.
Now, I read that you were injured. What happened to you?
Well, when I was in Ogden, Utah, we were consolidating. No. Erase that. It was towards the end of Des Moines. They built up a new barracks for the cadre, the permanent personnel, because all the enlistees were down. They still remained in the stable area, but all the cadre, the officers and everything, they gave us the officers' homes, and they built a big place for the non-commissioned officers, and that was our dwelling. So from there, moving the stuff from down where the stables were and pushing it up to what we call Mushroom Town, because the buildings, they just mushroomed, like a mushroom comes out of the ground. And they came up so fast, but moving the heavy supplies from one place to another, it was a toll on your energy and the wear and tear of your body. It was heavy work because we had no men whatsoever, and we didn't have those electric push carts that they have today, or the go-karts or whatever. We had to do, everything was manual labor. We didn't even have, what did they call it, those little things that take things off trucks and put it in a warehouse.
Oh, the little forklifts.
Right. Never.
Now, how were you injured?
By lifting, and I got a very severe rupture through my whole system, and that kind of caused a physical downfall.
Okay. I noticed you said something about playing the harmonica while you were in service.
Yes. Well, at night when we were down in the stables, living down there, as I was saying, the birds would come in at night, and if they heard sound, they kind of sort of would stay away. But by my playing the harmonica, which meant there was a sound there, so the birds would kind of nest somewhere else until we all settled down, and then they would come in and take over the overhead of the...
Yeah, you said it was kind of dangerous sleeping at night in their wives.
It was. Now you know why, because, the birds are not clean.
So were the sides open on the stable where you
Oh, no.
were?
It was closed, like your doors were closed, but they had all their little holes that they came in at night. There were nests all over the place. Yeah. Let me tell you, the laundry was heavy. We didn't have washing machines then either in our barracks. Everything was to the laundry.
What was I going to ask? What do you think were some of the things that left the greatest impression on you while you were in service?
Well, first of all, to be a pioneer in something is so much more memorable. You feel as if you saw something grow from the bottom, and it just grew and grew and grew. And to think of what it is today, I'm proud that I was a part of that at the beginning as a pioneer.
Were there any others that you stayed in contact with that you'd become friends with? No.
When you left the service at that time, you were glad to get out. you served your time. The country was starting to settle down, and you figured, well, let me go home. And my mother got very sick at the time, so I felt my place was should be with her. Because the Army, I gave enough time to my military service.
Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about the death of President Roosevelt?
About what?
The death of President Roosevelt.
Well, where was I? That happened at the end of 42, didn't it?
No, 45.
40.
Just before the surrender.
Oh, no, then I must have been home. Yeah, I must have been home.
Yeah,
but she came to visit us in Des Moines, Illinois.
Oh, she did.
Yeah, and one of the men reporters, no, I shouldn't say this. Turn that off.
You can say it.
No. See, the men used to think we were in service to give the civilian population that was outside thought the women were going into service to make men, they kept us so busy. We didn't know what an 8-hour day was. 24 hours, yes. And if they had 26 hours, they would have kept us occupied 26 hours because there was so much to do. And you were needed every time. So hanky-panky was out of the question. I mean, where I was, let's put it that way. You may have heard differently, but whatever.
Did you get to see any USO shows or anything?
Oh, yes. When I was in the hospital, I was in Ogden, Utah, in Brigham, Utah. They have a big hospital there. And Bob Hope came.
Oh.
And they took all of us, and I was on a stretcher, and they took all of us down. And the aide that I had went and said, he made a front spot for me. So he's coming through and he was visiting us, the ones on the stretchers. And all of a sudden he saw, a little more hair on me than he saw on the other patients. So he said, oh, a woman. And I said, yes, sir. So he says, don't sir me. He says, however, what are you doing here? He whispers in my ear. But the aide said she had a very serious accent. Oh, she's going to be better. She looks good. He patted me on the head and went on.
Okay. When do you remember, you were at the service then, the end of World War II and VE Day and VJ Day?
I was very happy. I was so glad. Because I had 3 brothers that were in service also. And one of them was out in Okinawa, the other one was in Washington, and my 3rd brother was over in Austria. And they were still finding it tough, even though the war ended. Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt when you heard about the dropping of the atomic bombs?
Well, I was kind of relieved, feeling that our men would be home sooner. Because when I was in Ogden, Utah, the cases, being in the Air Force, we had a lot of the young pilots that were over in the Pacific that were shot at. And they came to Bushland General Hospital in Utah. And our girls would have to go down to the flight path and kind of lead the planes in, and many times when the pilots get out and they saw a gal there, they'd say, what are you doing here? And she says, the same as you are. Because they didn't realize, that women were also on the fields, directing the planes coming in. And then when we saw the stretcher cases, that was sickening. It was very bad, young. And then when I was in the hospital and I saw them up close, that was awful. So that the atomic bomb kind of sort of gave me a little relief, knowing less of our men are going to come back in a basket case, as a basket case.
Did you ever use the GI Bill at all?
Yes, I did. Thank goodness.
In what way?
I went to a secretarial college, and then I also went down here to JCA, and I got a degree in library science. I didn't get I didn't get the bachelor's. I got
An
just
associate's degree?
associate degree in library science, and it helped me out quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever use the 5220 club?
Oh yeah, my husband and I went to Florida on that.
When did you marry?
We got married in 45.
Was he in the service at all?
He was in the paratroopers.
Oh,
He had
was he?
101st Airborne. But I knew him, prior to going in service. Yep.
Okay. Did you ever join any veterans organizations?
Yeah, well, I'm a charter member of the DAV up in Saratoga, the Saratoga Post, and I also belong to the American Legion, the Zagola Post down here
Okay.
in Colonie.
How do you think your time in the military service affected your life?
Well, it made me appreciate life much more knowing that when you're in something like that, the camaraderie that you form is it's so genuine. And you may have had sisters and brothers at home, but when you were in a group there, they were your friends and your relatives all combined in one. We associated very well together.
Now I noticed in this newspaper article
Oh yeah,
you were in, you said that you felt very happy in service. Why is that?
I was very content because it changed me completely. It made a very meek and mild person from me. I was a meek and mild person prior to going into service. When I came out of service, now I can look you in the eye and talk without shaking or, it gave me a lot of confidence and poise and determination, yeah. And financially it helped me out because I retired, from the federal government.
What kind of work did you do with the federal
Well,
government?
when I worked for the Air Force, I was a commissary auditor. I was in statistical training. See, without the teeth, I can't say. And then I was a librarian for the military. And then I became a clerk. And I worked in the regular part of the government as a clerk. Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for your interview.
Yeah, well, I hope I didn't...
Oh, yes.
She's got some pictures.
Yes, yeah, we wanted to do that.
Oh,
You hope what?
I
was a
hope
very
that I
good
didn't
interview.
bore you.
No, not
you
at
did
all.
not. Okay. We can just hold them up here and Wayne can focus on them. Well, I could hold it if you...
No, that's okay.
Control. So these were the first buildings you were in
Correct.
Des Moines.
Correct. These were the officers' buildings, right? And these were all officers. And any of them that washed out joined us as cadre. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I see you have yourself pointed out in each one of the pictures.
Oh yes, that's me. Yeah.
Okay. Now these are where you're wearing the men's
The men's
coats.
clothes, right? They didn't have enough women's clothes for us.
Now when were most of these pictures taken?
Well, this was between when I went in October. No, I was inducted in October, but I went in physically in November until the next June.
Okay. Now these are the fatigue hats you're wearing here. Were these men's fatigues or did they have fatigue hats for women?
No, these were men and women all had
Oh,
the
the
same. They
same.
didn't have any. They didn't get our wardrobe put together yet.
Okay.
Okay. That's
That's
you
me.
again. Okay.
And this was the contingency that I wanted to go to in Italy, right up here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are they going to come out?
Oh, yes. Yeah, look them up very well.
Aren't they? Well,
Now, these were some of your friends and...
yeah, well, this is part of our underwear. And this was me as a mail clerk when we were being trained in cadre. So you had to train for every position.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, that's not you in there, okay.
No, that was Cookie. Make sure you get the cat's name, which is NLD,
Oh, down here.
not
NLD.
line of duty.
Now, why did you have the cat?
Well, we were not allowed to have him,
Mm-hmm.
but we used to go to a little bar outside our fence in Utah. I mean, in Des Moines, Iowa. And the farmers, they said, we have a little playmate for you, so they gave us a little dog, and they gave us a little cat, and that was the little cat. But we had snakes too, because our barracks were like raised, and at night the snakes would come down from the mountains. Utah is very mountainous, and they would kind of sort of settle underneath our barracks, because we were on pylons, is that what you call it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so this is your group marching in Rome, New York. That's
Right,
interesting.
right. But I was CQ, so I had to stay back. I couldn't march. But I had a bum leg at the time, so it was a good excuse to get out.
Okay. And those are copies of orders?
Yep.
Okay, are you in that picture?
Yeah, a good conduct medal.
Mm-hmm.
That's me right here.
Okay.
Isn't that me? Yeah, good conduct medal.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hillfield, Ogden, Utah. Yep. And that was the write-up we got in the paper. This is me in our day room over here. Naturally, see me petting the cat? There we go. That was me. See, that was NLD, not in line of duty. She was my buddy, this one here. She was my supply sergeant.
Do you know whatever happened to her?
No, I would have. She would have been the only one I would have liked to have had contact with. Oh.
Okay. Do you ever keep any of your uniforms or anything?
No. When I came out, we didn't have that much money to get a good wardrobe. So I went and I had mine dyed. It dyed beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Now, what is that picture?
Those are the cooks. Different outfits of the cooks.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. They call them C&B, cooks and bakers.
And what's that bottom picture? It looks like a fashion show.
Well, we were having a shindig of some kind.
Uh-huh.
Now, where are you in that picture?
I'm not.
Oh, you're not?
No, these are real gal hold downs. They were real. Well, as supply sergeant, you had to order the food also, and if you had any money left over, you never returned money to the government. Am I still on today?
Yes.
So if we had anything left over, we used to be very good, treat ourselves good, and get frozen strawberry, frozen pies, whatever the goodies we didn't get in our regular diet. Now this gal was not supposed. We were getting a new commander of the base, and one of his rules were no smoking. He never wanted to see a cigarette in a woman's face, so she just broke all the rules. She's sitting in a developing pot, a pan, and smoking a cigarette. Isn't she smoking a cigarette?
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
This is your pass?
Yeah, and this is when out in Utah, when we went, they took the Red Cross, sent us with the group to go hiking in the woods. And our officer was allowed to carry arms, because they had some big snakes out there. Yep. I'm in here, but I'm hidden.
Now, is that a dance on bass or?
Yeah, like a social. I'm back here somewhere. Well, whatever. See, I was very shy. I never wanted my picture taken.
Okay.
Ooh, yep. You can't go without that. That was when we were 1 year old. The Air Force, I mean, was 1 year old.
women.
The Air Force was 1 year
And
old.
that's you right there.
Yep.
So what are the others doing to you there?
Spanking us. You get spanked for your
Birthday spanking,
Your
okay.
birthday spanking, yep.
Okay.
Wait, it's getting a little on the heavy side now.
Okay. Now this is at Newark, when you went to
Yep.
Newark?
See,
It's there.
we had a lake that separated the men from the women. So we had our gals were driving these buggies, and they used to take us all around the base.
Okay.
And then when we had time off, you know, we had the big lake. Now this is the original women's stationery. And we were starting to save stamps. I got as far as to remember the stamps we had to save.
Okay.
I bet there aren't too many of
No,
pieces of
probably
that
not.
left around.
Now this is my brother was overseas and he sent me these pictures.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I hope it was, you know, whatever.